Adventure, romance, comedy, sword fights, and a story within a story. The Princess Bride has it all. But behind the magic lies secrets you've never heard before. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to uncover them. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up.
Number 1.
On the surface, The Princess Bride looks like the most obvious Hollywood success story ever written. A romantic fairy tale with sword fights, giants, and a clever twist on the classic bedtime story. And before we go any further, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. A lot of viewers forget, but it really helps keep these stories alive. But when author William Goldman, already a 2-time Academy Award winner, first tried to get it made, every single major studio turned him down. Why? Because no one understood what it was. Some executives thought it was too strange. Others believed audiences wouldn't accept a film that bounced between a grandfather reading a book and the swashbuckling action inside the story. It wasn't a traditional fantasy. It wasn't a straight comedy. It wasn't quite romance. And for Hollywood, that meant it was unmarketable. Goldman was crushed. He had poured his heart into the novel, believing it was one of the most magical things he'd ever written. Yet, for years, the project gathered dust. Executives pushed it aside for safer bets, like straightforward comedies or action films. Then, in walked Rob Reiner. At the time, Reiner was best known as an actor on All in the Family, and he had just directed the cult hit mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap. When he read The Princess Bride, he didn't just enjoy it. He was floored. He called it one of the greatest stories ever written. But here's the key difference. Reiner didn't want to change the story to make it more Hollywood-friendly. He wanted to protect it. He promised Goldman he would keep the tone intact, the fairy tale charm, the humor, the shifting narrative, and that subtle wink at the audience. That promise was all Goldman needed to finally hand over the rights. So, in a sense, The Princess Bride was born not out of Hollywood's confidence, but out of one man's belief. It began not with a studio deal, but with a filmmaker who said, "I won't let them flatten this. I'll honor the magic." That decision would be the first of many battles to bring the film to life.
2.
Even after Reiner secured the project, Hollywood executives still didn't understand it. Their biggest complaint? The bedroom framing device. The sick grandson being read to by his grandfather. To the studio, this was confusing. They argued, why break the fantasy by cutting back to reality? Can't we just tell the story in one straight line? But Goldman knew better. Without that frame, The Princess Bride would be just another fantasy movie. The grandfather and grandson weren't just filler. They were the heart. That back and forth reminded audiences that stories are more than entertainment. They're how generations connect. When executives threatened to cut the frame, Goldman didn't hold back. He told them bluntly, "If you touch that part, I walk." And he meant it. He was ready to let the project die a second death rather than lose the soul of the story. Thankfully, Rob Reiner backed him up completely. The frame stayed. And today, those moments with Peter Falk as the grandfather and young Fred Savage as the boy aren't just memorable. They're iconic. They're the reason kids and parents both find something to love in the film. Without the frame, The Princess Bride might have been a quirky fantasy. With it, it became timeless.
Number 3.
The role of Wesley, the humble farm boy turned heroic Dread Pirate Roberts, was one of the hardest to cast. Studios searched endlessly, scanning headshots, auditioning actors, and coming up empty. The character required a strange combination: boyish innocence, razor-sharp wit, and the kind of romantic presence that felt eternal. Then came Cary Elwes. A British actor with just a few credits at the time, Elwes had the exact balance of mischief and charm that the role demanded. He didn't even audition in the traditional sense. Instead, during a meeting with Rob Reiner, he casually impressed everyone with his natural charisma. Reiner later recalled that the decision was instant. The moment Elwes left the room, he turned to the team and said, "That's him. That's Wesley." What made Elwes perfect wasn't just his looks or timing. It was his ability to play the role with complete sincerity. In a movie filled with satire and parody, Wesley needed to be someone the audience could truly believe in. Too much comedy, and the romance would collapse. Too much seriousness, and the fun would vanish. Elwes walked that razor's edge flawlessly, and so the Dread Pirate Roberts was born, not out of a lengthy screen test, but out of a gut feeling that this was the man who could make audiences say the words, "As you wish."
Number 4.
On screen, Andre the Giant looked unstoppable. Standing at 7 feet 4 inches tall and weighing over 500 pounds, his presence as Fezzik was both hilarious and heartwarming. He could carry men on his shoulders, hurl boulders, and stop enemies with a single hand. To fans, he was a living legend. But behind the scenes, things were different. Years of professional wrestling had left Andre with severe back problems. By the time filming began, he was in constant pain. In fact, he could barely lift anything heavy. When the script called for him to carry Robin Wright in his arms, the reality was heartbreaking. He simply couldn't do it. The filmmakers had to rely on camera tricks, hidden wires, and clever staging to create the illusion of his strength. And yet, on screen, you'd never guess the truth. Andre sold every moment with his smile, his warmth, and his gentle humor. There's another story that reveals just how much he suffered. One day on set, Cary Elwes decided to take a spin on Andre's custom-built ATV, a massive machine designed to support his enormous frame. Elwes lost control and snapped his toe. He finished filming with a broken foot, limping through scenes in the fire swamp and torture chamber. The irony was almost poetic. The giant wasn't as strong as he looked, and the hero was secretly in agony the whole time. Yet both pushed through, and that's part of why their friendship and their performances still resonate decades later.
Number 5.
The role of Miracle Max was small, but when Billy Crystal stepped onto set, he turned it into a storm of comedy. Improvising wildly, he never delivered the same line twice. Every take was fresh, unpredictable, and hysterical. The chaos was contagious. Mandy Patinkin, who played Inigo Montoya, prided himself on being disciplined and serious. But in the presence of Crystal, he couldn't hold it together. He laughed so hard that he literally injured himself, pulling a muscle in his ribcage that left him in pain for days. Even Rob Reiner, the director, couldn't resist. He laughed so loudly during filming that his voice ruined several takes. Eventually, the crew had to physically remove him from the set and station him behind a monitor so he wouldn't wreck the audio. But what Crystal gave the film was more than laughs. His off-the-cuff energy turned Miracle Max into one of the most beloved characters in the movie. He brought unpredictability into a film that was already magical, reminding everyone, cast, crew, and audience alike, that sometimes the best moments in cinema aren't written, they're discovered.
Number 6.
One of the most shocking moments in The Princess Bride happens when Count Rugen, played by Christopher Guest, brutally knocks out Wesley. The scene looks terrifyingly real, because it was. During rehearsals, the stunt was carefully choreographed. Guest was supposed to fake the strike with his sword hilt, but Cary Elwes, always a perfectionist, had an idea. "Hit me for real, just once. It'll look more authentic." Guest hesitated, but eventually agreed. When the cameras rolled, he swung. The hilt connected harder than intended, and Elwes dropped like a stone. He was knocked completely unconscious. When he woke up, he had no memory of the fall. The dazed, glassy look on his face in the final cut, that wasn't acting. That was the genuine aftermath of a head injury. Reiner decided to keep it in the movie. Why? Because it was perfect. That moment of rawness captured exactly what the scene needed. The brutality of the villain and the helplessness of the hero. Hollywood loves illusions, but sometimes the truth slips in. And in this case, reality hit harder than any script could plan.
Number 7.
The role of Princess Buttercup was one of the most coveted parts of the 1980s. Dozens of rising stars auditioned, including Uma Thurman, Courtney Cox, and Meg Ryan. Each brought talent and charisma, but none felt like the fairy tale come to life. Then came Robin Wright. She wasn't a household name. In fact, she was relatively unknown, having mostly worked in television. She walked into her audition shy, almost whispering her lines. But there was something in her sadness, something in her quiet sincerity, that struck Rob Reiner instantly. Reiner later said, "She didn't play Buttercup, she was Buttercup." Unlike the others, Wright didn't try to dazzle with charm. She simply embodied the character's heart. a young woman who believed in love but carried the weight of real pain. That authenticity is what made audiences believe that Wesley's devotion was worth fighting for. Buttercup could have been a cliché, the damsel in distress, but Wright turned her into something else, the emotional anchor of the entire fairy tale.
Number 8.
The set of The Princess Bride was full of humor, but no one disrupted it more than Billy Crystal as Miracle Max. He improvised so relentlessly that not even the director could contain himself. Rob Reiner laughed so hard during one scene that he physically ruined the audio track. His laughter bled into the microphones, forcing the crew to redo takes. Eventually, they banished him from the set, hiding him behind a monitor just to get through filming. Mandy Patinkin, meanwhile, tried to stay professional, but Crystal's wild improvisation was too much. In his attempt to suppress his laughter, he clenched his body so tightly that he actually bruised a rib. For the rest of the shoot, he winced in pain every time he laughed, but still couldn't stop. What was supposed to be a short comedic cameo became one of the most memorable moments in the film, proving that sometimes chaos is cinema's secret ingredient.
Number 9.
As unforgettable as Vizzini became, the actor behind him, Wallace Shawn, almost didn't survive the pressure. Rumors swirled that the studio originally wanted Danny DeVito for the role. Shawn heard the whispers and convinced himself he was merely a temporary stand-in until DeVito became available. The paranoia grew. Every line Shawn delivered, he second-guessed. Every joke he cracked, he feared was falling flat. He became so anxious that he had a panic attack in the middle of filming. What no one told him was that his unique nervous energy was exactly what made the character iconic. His rapid-fire delivery, his unusual rhythm, his constant edge of panic, those quirks weren't problems. They were gifts. And the irony? Today, fans quote Shawn's lines more than almost anyone else in the film. The man who thought he'd be replaced ended up becoming irreplaceable.
Number 10.
The sword fight between Inigo Montoya and Wesley isn't just the most famous duel in the film, it's one of the most legendary in cinema history. Unlike most movies, which rely heavily on stunt doubles, both Mandy Patinkin and Cary Elwes trained for months with two of the world's best sword masters. Every lunge, parry, and flip was rehearsed until it looked effortless. They shot the duel in long, unbroken takes. No cheats, no shortcuts. What audiences saw was real skill, built through endless repetition. The duel works not just because of the athleticism, but because of the dialogue. It wasn't just swordplay. It was a conversation in steel, a witty exchange that revealed the heart of both characters. When Inigo says, "I swear, on the soul of my father, you will reach the top alive," it wasn't just a promise. It was a glimpse into his soul. That duel wasn't just spectacle. It was storytelling, written with blades.
Number 11.
The fire swamp looks like a fantastical nightmare on screen. Flames erupting, fog swirling, and giant rodents attacking. But filming it was far worse than watching it. The set was suffocating. Fog machines pumped thick clouds non-stop. The fake trees trapped heat. The actors were drenched in sweat, struggling to breathe. Cary Elwes nearly passed out from heat exhaustion, while the poor stuntmen inside the rodents of unusual-sized costumes collapsed repeatedly from the unbearable heat. What looks whimsical and magical on screen was, in reality, a survival exercise. Every second of that swamp came at the cost of pure discomfort.
Number 12.
At the end of the film, Wesley and Buttercup finally reunite with a kiss. Simple, right? Not for Rob Reiner. He demanded perfection. The kiss couldn't just be romantic, it had to be the kiss, the one audiences would remember forever. So he made Cary Elwes and Robin Wright film it again, and again, and again. They kissed so many times their lips were raw. Crew members rolled their eyes. The sun shifted, hours passed, but Reiner refused to settle. Finally, after more than 30 takes, he got what he wanted. Not a dramatic Hollywood embrace, but something gentler, quieter, and deeply human. The kiss that closes the film isn't flashy, it's timeless.
Number 13.
Audiences believed Andre the Giant could lift anything. After all, he was a wrestling legend and the largest man most people had ever seen. But the truth was heartbreaking. By the time of filming, his back was so damaged that he couldn't lift heavy objects at all. Every time it looked like he was carrying someone, wires or camera tricks were helping. His size gave the illusion of invincibility, but his body was already failing him. And yet, his gentleness, his humor, and his loyalty made Fezzik unforgettable. He didn't need real strength. His heart carried the story.
Number 14.
For Mandy Patinkin, the role of Inigo Montoya was deeply personal. As a teenager, Patinkin lost his father to cancer. The pain stayed with him for decades. So when he stepped into the role of a swordsman whose life revolved around avenging his father's death, it wasn't just acting. During the climactic duel with Count Rugen, when he repeated the line, "You killed my father, prepare to die," he wasn't just channeling Inigo, he was speaking to death itself. Patinkin later admitted that the scene gave him a strange form of closure. For those moments, it felt as if he were avenging his own father. That raw emotion is why the duel still hits audiences so hard today.
Number 15.
When The Princess Bride released in 1987, it wasn't a hit. The studio didn't know how to market it. Was it a comedy? A romance? A fairy tale? A kids movie? Audiences were confused and ticket sales fizzled. The film quickly disappeared from theaters. But then came VHS. Families discovered it at home. Kids memorized the lines. College students played it in dorm rooms. Slowly, word of mouth transformed a flop into a cult classic. By the 1990s, it wasn't just a movie. It was a phenomenon.
Number 16.
In 2020, during the global pandemic, the cast reunited. Not for a studio project, but to raise money for COVID-19 relief. Cary Elwes, Robin Wright, Mandy Patinkin, and even Rob Reiner filmed scenes from their homes. It was awkward, grainy, and hilarious. But it worked. In a year when the world was desperate for hope, the cast of The Princess Bride reminded everyone of the power of true love, laughter, and timeless stories.
Number 17.
Fred Savage, who played the grandson, didn't get his role through auditions. Rob Reiner spotted him by chance in a pizza shop. Reiner noticed something about the boy's natural presence. He wasn't polished or rehearsed, but he was authentic. That authenticity is what made the framing device work. When Savage asks, "Grandpa, maybe you could come back and read it again tomorrow," it doesn't sound like acting. It sounds like a real kid who doesn't want the story to end.
Number 18.
In 2016, The Princess Bride was added to the Library of Congress National Film Registry, alongside classics like Casablanca and The Wizard of Oz. It was preserved not for its box office numbers, but because it had become part of cultural history, a film that crossed generations and never aged.
Number 19.
Tragically, Andre the Giant never saw The Princess Bride in theaters. His health kept him from traveling. When Rob Reiner offered to bring him a private print, Andre declined, saying, "I don't need to see it. I lived it." To him, the joy came from being part of the cast, from being loved not as a spectacle, but as a storyteller. Today, Fezzik remains one of the most beloved characters in film history, a giant who showed that strength comes in many forms.
Number 20.
The Princess Bride only grows. Fans quote it, tattoo it, name their children after its characters. Weddings are themed around it. Priests even perform ceremonies quoting, "Maui age is what brings us together today." Why? Because The Princess Bride isn't just a movie. It's a ritual, a way of passing on love, humor, and hope from one generation to the next. The grandfather in the film hands a story to his grandson. Decades later, fans are doing the same, handing it to their children, their friends, their communities. And when they whisper the words, "as you wish," they're not just quoting a movie. They're keeping alive one of the greatest love stories ever told.
Bonus.
Before The Princess Bride became a cult classic, it was nearly forgotten in the dusty backrooms of Hollywood. William Goldman, the legendary screenwriter, poured his heart into adapting his own novel. He believed in the story fiercely, the romance, the humor, the swashbuckling adventure. But when he shopped the script around, the response was almost always the same. It's too strange. Studios didn't know what to do with it. Was it a children's fairy tale? Was it satire? Was it a romance? The truth was, it was all of those things. And that's exactly why executives were terrified. For nearly 10 years, the project bounced from desk to desk. At one point, the rights expired completely, and Goldman had to buy back his own script just to keep the dream alive. Even when directors showed interest, studios balked. One studio executive reportedly said, "Nobody wants a fractured fairy tale." To make matters worse, some early producers pushed for massive changes. One suggestion: cut the grandfather and grandson scenes entirely, leaving only the fantasy portion. Without those scenes, the entire emotional framework, the idea of stories being passed down through generations, would have been destroyed. The film was slipping away, piece by piece. Then along came Rob Reiner. Fresh from the success of This Is Spinal Tap, Reiner wasn't just interested, he was obsessed. He fought for the script, he defended Goldman's structure, and he convinced skeptical backers to take the risk. Thanks to that persistence, what was once considered unfilmable became a cultural treasure. And Goldman? He later said that seeing The Princess Bride completed was the proudest moment of his career. It's almost poetic. A story about true love and impossible odds nearly vanished itself. But like Wesley, it came back from the dead stronger than ever. And if that isn't worth a like and a subscribe, what is? Support this channel so more impossible stories like this one can be told.